In this video, Al and I talk about the two types of photography, commercial photography versus wedding photography. When I say wedding photography, I'm really talking about having families as your client as opposed to companies, which is commercial photography. It's a pretty interesting discussion, and I think you're going to get a lot out of it. I think it'll help you understand photography a lot better.
Okay, we're going to have a little conversation about how commercial photography differs from the wedding photographer. So, in the wedding photographer, I think we were talking about it, and I think people have an idea of what a wedding photographer does. If you said, what does a wedding photographer do? Well, they photograph the event and they hang out with the family for the day, and they're everywhere, and they kind of go rogue. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is wedding photographers do weddings all the time. And when we say wedding photographers, we're sort of dividing wedding photography, throwing them in the same batch as portrait photographers that are. The whole thing is the client.
Right.
There's half of us where the family is the client,
Yep.
and commercial people, businesses are the client.
Yeah.
And it's just different markets, and they expect different things. But wedding photographers, they show up on a Saturday. They did a wedding last week, and they're going to do it very similar to what they did last week. And the next week, they're going to do another wedding. It's going to be very similar to that. I mean, sure, things will be different, but they're going to do these shots,
Right.
And it's different than commercial.
In some respects, it can be more stressful.
Oh, yeah.
Because you got real life happening in front of you, where on the commercial side, there has been a few times where I'm like, I need to reshoot that. As we get older, our eyes aren't as sharp, and it's like, man, I missed a little, but when you're shooting weddings, you can't do that. But.
Yeah. I mean, I used to shoot weddings, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I had a good time. I mean, I might do it sometime in the future, but the reason I decided not to do it anymore is because the markets. I mean, if you go into an art director and they know you do weddings, they discount you right away. There are a few people. There are a few people around that can straddle that, but not very many. And you have to have sort of the journalistic specialty.
There's somebody coming to mind.
Yes, Terry Clark.
Yep.
He's an excellent photographer. He's like probably one of the best in Pittsburgh, but he has a certain look, and that look straddles both, commercial and wedding. I mean, it's kind of the same casual, catch it, journalistic style.
Yeah.
And that's what he does, and he applies it in both places, and he's amazing. He's good.
He is very good. Nice fellow too.
Yeah.
And on the commercial side, we're usually part of a team. And I kind of mentioned that on the onset, like the wedding guy kind of goes rogue on his own, and he has a huge responsibility to be very consistent in coming up with these life-changing shots, because wedding photography can be, it can be very high demand, like of what they want. Because, early on when film was the thing, and you've talked about this, and, you had 36 shots, and you had so many rolls of film for the day, and you had to make that work.
Let me tell you about back in my day.
Sure.
But when I first started, when I was in my 20s, Jeff and I used to work for this same photographer, and I actually worked for a couple others too. We didn't work for them. That we were their shooter. If they got an overflow, they'd give it to us, right? And we were shooting 2 1/4 Hasselblad stuff at the time,
right?
And there was 12 pictures to a roll.
Right.
We would go into the photo studio in the morning. They would hand us 10 rolls of film. That means we had 120 pictures to shoot that day. Now, you had to plan those out so that you made sure you got all the required shots, everything from, bride coming down the aisle and, the groom carrying her out at the very end. You had to make sure you had that one shot left to do that. And that was stressful. Not only was it stressful that way, now if you want to see if you get a good shot, you go click and you look at the back of the camera and say, yeah, I got it.
Right.
You might have missed focus a wee little bit, but back then it's like it was on the film. You didn't know
You didn't
until
even
a
have
week
Polaroids.
later. Yeah, a week later you didn't know if you had it. But
That's right.
I don't want to talk about the snow too much.
Yeah, no, I get it. And, you know, but getting back to today's, you know, you will shoot thousands and thousands of images. And that honestly is a blessing for,
Oh, yeah.
could you imagine taking a Hasselblad to a wedding today? I wouldn't do it. It'd be the most terrifying thing in the world to me. I wouldn't do it.
Just the focus. Can you imagine the focus?
No, I can't. I can't. I just can't. That's a lifetime ago.
It is.
It's
It's
just
crazy.
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago. You know, and that gets into, you know, the wedding side or the family portrait side or whatever. It has a specific purpose. And on the commercial side, it has a specific purpose for who hired you that day. You know, whether it be you're shooting for an annual report, or you're creating social media content, you know, I mean, and sometimes it's both, you know, where I'm not saying they double dip, but you know what I mean? I'm sure you've had those experiences.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The thing about weddings is you're usually hired because of your, like, they've seen pictures that you've done. Okay, they know what the bridal party shot is going to look like about like that, right? So they're going in for what you're producing. Whereas a commercial photographer, most of the time, unless you're one of the really elite, you're trying to make the client happy, and it's a totally different thing. You're like if as a wedding photographer, I don't think they go and say, well, what do you want me to do? Like, how do you want me to arrange this shot?
Right.
But as a commercial photographer, that's what you're doing. You're working to a layout most of the time,
Right.
or at least a dimension. You know, it's like you need to fill that web page picture, and that's a vertical, that's 2x3 dimension kind of thing. That's what you're composing to. Whereas the wedding photographer, they just want to make a pretty picture that is going to create emotion.
Yeah. Fill the frame.
Yeah, it's going to be it's a different animal. I mean, it's not worse, better, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I like working with layouts because to me, it feels very concrete in a way. You know, and I love leaving room for text and the things like, you know, shooting a magazine cover or whatever. Like, you have to pre-think how it's going to be, and, you know, the negative space. Like, compositionally, you might never do that if it was just, I'm a fill the frame guy and I'm going to make a nice image. But when you're working with a layout, you think in that layout way, knowing that the header's here and there's going to be copy here or whatever. And then whenever the art director puts it together, it's really beautiful. Like,
It's hard to do though sometimes. I mean, if you're working tethered to the camera and it's on your computer, and then you can suck it into the computer and already has the type in place.
Right.
That's a lot easier to do.
Sure. And honestly, I find if we are working to a layout, I am pretty much on a tripod of some stability of some sort. You know, it has gone the other way. Like, I just did a job recently where I was at the School for the Blind, and I was really just covering it like an event, but my job was to make pretty pictures. And the art director didn't know exactly how they were going to use it, whether it was horizontal, vertically. And, you know, he sent over some of the finished work, and it was really great. You know,
he was working to what you gave them.
Yeah.
And that's a large percentage of what we do is just that.
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't always have the time or the budget. Like, they want quantity. Like just like in wedding, they want quantity too. But sometimes the art directors or the clients we work for, they want a ton of images, and they might have like they might have a immediate need that you're giving them images, but they also want a library of images for other things.
Right.
And it's not even in the works yet.
Right.
And so I don't mind those things. I kind of like that too, you know.
You know what drives me crazy is when I have jobs like that and the client gets to see what I'm doing, and sometimes they'll like, I'll compose an image so I think it looks nice. Nice balance and no tangents and all this other stuff. And what'll happen is they'll say, "Oh, that's nice, but just go wider. I'll crop in if I want to."
Yeah.
That drives me crazy because then all of a sudden, all that composition goes out the door. Like you're not making a pretty picture anymore. You're like just getting it in the frame, and it drives me crazy. But that's a tangent.
That is it. Yeah. I mean, you can get into lenses and things like that. It's like, well, just shoot wider. Well, you lose the compression, you lose everything.
The focus is a big thing.
Yeah. We should actually, at some point have a conversation on, technical things like lenses. What did they do? Why do you choose that lens? There's some people that would enjoy that.
Yeah.
When you're working with, when you're doing weddings, you're not always working with professional models and stylists. Usually on the wedding side, you have a hair and makeup person that comes early and, they do that. It's a whole outing now. And sometimes they want you to photograph that too. But, when on the commercial side, you do get to work with a lot of models who come with an idea of how to move.
Hopefully some of them.
Some of them don't. But on the wedding side, they really rely on you to position them correctly, in their best light, so to speak, and the models do too. But I've worked with some models where they were beyond what I could come up with. Like they just know how to move. And,
right.
And that's really a great joy. That's when you as a commercial photographer can sit back and say, it's amazing what they're giving me here,
Oh yeah. I just remember this one girl. She was like 17 years old, this blonde, and I forget why I hired her. But anyways, she goes, "Oh, you want me to like fake walk?" And she showed me how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, I couldn't instruct her how to do it correctly.
Right.
But she told me, I mean, she had been doing this since she was like 12 years old.
Right.
And she was just so good, so experienced, she'd be looking off to the side, like she was awesome.
Yeah. And it makes your job easier.
But then you get these so-called professional models that like they're professional. This is their first job ever. And
right.
they're just as bad as any.
Yeah. I've seen people that have walked through the studio doors and you're like, they're going to be great. And they weren't. I mean, and then I've had people to walk through and I'm like, really? And then like, they like morph into something else. Like I've seen that.
That reminds me of this woman. Back when I was in school, we had models come in, would take their pictures, and like this one woman came in. She had this really long face, and it's like I'm thinking, oh man, that's this isn't going to work out. And she photographed so nicely.
Yeah,
she was amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, she was just amazing.
I agree with you. I mean, I've experienced that over and over, and and generally, we get to study faces, and usually it takes me maybe a minute. Like there is such a thing as a good side and a bad side. Some people are very equal in both, and I've run into that. But usually, you work with them, you talk with them.
What makes you come up with that decision? Because I normally have to test it before I can tell. And then I can't tell because my lighting's usually already set.
Yeah. I mean, normally I will have a conversation with them and I'll see how they naturally.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for nose and eye. You know what I mean? Like sometimes like the nose it just looks different on one side or the other. And you know that's their strong dominant side. Like, and that's just reading body language. And usually I figure that out like within a minute. And I'll tell them like, this is your good side.
How often do they agree with you? How often do they disagree?
The ones that know always agree. The ones that don't know are like, oh, they just didn't know, so I love when they don't know because they feel really good about themselves. And that's a nice thing.
You might be wrong, but no, one of the things I don't know. I guess I've never done that. Look for their quote good side. I usually I pick the side, like for example, if their hair is parted down this side, if that side is opened up to us, usually that's the side that photographs better for me. But
I see.
Maybe I learned something today.
You might. I mean, it's just something that I naturally figured out, and talking with them.
What's my good side?
It's this side.
Why?
Because it's just the way your eyes go. I mean, I'm staring at you, but I mean, like I can tell immediately.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't think I had a good side.
You do. I mean, you're pretty equal down the line. You have a hint in here. The deliverables are different.
Well,
What I mean by that?
What I meant by that was, you have a wedding album, or you have pictures, or with us, you have files. You sometimes retouch them, sometimes you don't retouch them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times your clients are graphic designers that have the skills themselves to retouch, or sometimes they have like retouchers on staff that can do that. Even though I think I'm a better portrait retoucher than anybody else. Like, I just think I can come up with better portrait retouching.
How do you feel when they say, just give me the files?
If I wasn't charging them for retouching, I feel just fine. It's one of those things where, you just have to trust them.
Do you ever get the comment where they're like, "Hey, I don't want to. Sorry about that. I don't want to manipulate your image." You ever get them to say that? I mean, I've had people say that.
Yeah,
to me.
I mean, it's been a long time, but I don't have a problem. I'm not a prima donna. I realize that I'm part of a team, and we're trying to create something not for myself.
Right.
We're trying to create it for the client's best interest.
And I think that's important, for people to understand that are getting into it. Like, you might think you're an artist and you might be very artistic, but you're of service to the end result. And the end result is whatever they're putting out, whether it be billboard, a flyer, a menu, whatever it is.
There are some photographers that really get insulted over something like that, but I'm not one of them.
I wouldn't suggest getting insulted if you can get past that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, for sure.
I think that will help you in your career financially and in your length of career.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to do everything you can not to be a pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it boils down to.
Right.
You want to be easy to work with.
Yeah.
And chances are what you just produced, if it's really a portfolio quality, then you have that image yourself. You can keep it. You can put it in your portfolio, and you can manipulate it the way you want to. Yeah. But, they just paid you a lot of money for that picture, so let them do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we can get into the whole licensing thing and all that. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the difference between commercial and wedding. So I'm going to get into the next subject matter, which is equipment. And, I'm under the impression to work within your means, whether it's commercial or wedding. Now, on the wedding side, I think you can get away with less equipment. Now, that comes down to like $5,000 camera bodies and $5,000 camera bodies, right? But on the commercial side, we do have more equipment, because we have light modifiers and, tall tripods, low ones, Apple boxes, props, and all of these things. Where on a wedding side, if you have a really good case, I mean, you could use that your whole career, and maybe a little bit of lighting here and there. Because on the weddings, or on the commercial side, we are pretty cumbersome people. We have a lot of junk, and we accumulate a lot of stuff over the years.
I think it has to do more with the diversity of subject matter that we photograph.
Sure.
So, if we're photographing a toaster, then we need something to reflect into all the sides of it. That's something a wedding photographer would never even like.
Right.
They've never had to do something odd like that.
Or have time to do it.
Right. Or we're shooting a building, where maybe a tilt shift lens or something bizarre like that.
Right.
But I mean, a wedding photographer tends to shoot the same shots over and over. So once they've accumulated the equipment they need to do one wedding,
right,
then it's pretty much the same for the rest of the weddings.
Right.
Whereas, we're always doing something weird. Like, okay, we have to be up 20 feet in the air,
right,
we need a drone.
Yeah.
Or we have to,
We're in a freezer.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
a coal mine or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. But for somebody who's getting into the commercial side or even getting into weddings, I remember starting out, I had Sigma lenses. Nothing against Sigma, but they weren't Nikon, and I had Nikon bodies and some people had Canons, but the Sigma lenses were affordable to me at the time. And I did a lot of great work with them. And, somebody had told me a long time ago, if you keep your overhead low, you'll survive the downtime of things. And I think that's really important for somebody getting into the business. Like, you can really get stuck chasing technology nowadays. I need the newest one because it's 0.5 megapixel more and they have all these great features, and now it has AI technology and it's retina following. And
I love that. I love that.
And I think as you get older, you do need that. Like I do rely on things like that. But like I can remember back, starting out, and I really tried to work within my means, and I think that's a really good piece of advice for anybody, because you go on B&H's website or anything, there's a lot of shiny new things, and you can spend a lot of money. I mean, we used to make a joke that nothing was under 300. I think that number's changed now, but like it can be an expensive startup.
Oh yeah. If you're like most photographers I know are gear hounds.
Yeah.
And I'm one too.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I agree with you when you're just starting out. Like you want to get the equipment for the least as possible, and you have to balance that. If you don't want to buy something you're going to throw away in a year, kind of thing.
Right.
My solution to that problem back when I started was I had a friend that was a professional photographer, and I had just coincidentally the same kind of strobe he had,
Right.
and the same kind of camera he had,
Right.
and it's because he had it.
Right.
Because if I needed a lens that I didn't have, I could just go borrow Billy's lens.
Yeah.
Or if
smart.
I needed another power pack, I could just go borrow Billy's power pack.
Right.
And that's a nice resource.
It is a good resource. I mean, I can go along with that because I kind of did the same thing. We had Norman stuff, and I still have that stuff. It's not really worth anything now.
Nothing.
But yeah, I just as far as equipment goes, I between the two, and it's not like you need a ton of equipment to start out in commercial. I mean, if you land a job where there's room in the budget to maybe rent something, you can go that route too. There's places around.
Or you accumulate it as you buy it. Like, for example, we're working together on a job coming up where I'm supposed to fly my drone
Yep.
in a building, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, last time I did that, well, not the last time, 2 times before that, I crashed. Like, there was a church and the walls were so thick I couldn't get GPS lock, and it just like went off and whacked.
Yep.
Okay, well, this time I just went out and I bought some propeller guards.
Yep.
So, it was like $25, but it's one of those things, I bought it as I needed it.
Yeah.
So that's how you end up accumulating all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't buy it 2 years ago because I didn't need it 2 years ago.
Yeah. And your drone work is evolving, Yeah. And I think that's a good point. As you evolve, so does your equipment. You know what I mean?
You just have to be disciplined that you don't get carried away.
Yeah.
And we all fight that.
It's easy to
We
do.
still fight that.
I do.
I know you do.
Yeah. Okay. So commercial jobs, they can last multiple days.
Yeah, that's very unusual for a wedding photographer. I mean, usually, you might show up at the reception. I mean, the what's it called? The night
rehearsal.
before rehearsal dinner. Yeah. So you might show up that, take a couple pictures, but usually that's it. Or you might get lucky and get to do their engagement photos like 6 months before or whatever. Yeah. But you can have a job in commercial photography that lasts 2 weeks, 3 weeks,
Sure.
if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But that's a big difference,
It is. And I've done a few like Indian weddings where they were like 3 days.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've never done it.
They were like 3 days. But generally speaking, you're kind of in and out in for the day, out for the day. Yeah, I mean, I like multiple day commercial shoots. You know, because yeah, I do like them. I like the planning of them. That usually takes a team of people, to pull that sort of thing off correctly. And there's a lot of pre-production, like on single day shoots. I mean, there's days where we show up and we don't really know what we're going to do, but when you have multiple day shoots, it's pretty much laid out, and sometimes I like the shoots where I show up and I have no idea what I'm doing either. And that really challenges you.
Some days I like just half day shoots.
Yeah.
Like a half day portrait shoot.
Sure.
Like you're going on location, you're shooting 10 pictures, whatever.
Yeah.
I love those.
Yeah.
I love those.
Yeah. I agree with you. It gives you a moment to catch your breath too. Like sometimes those multiple day shoots, I mean, I don't sleep really well in between the shoots.
Yeah, especially like if you have to get up at 4 a.m. to get there and get prepped for and everything like that. I can't sleep the night before either.
That's that whole alarm clock anticipation thing.
Yeah. But that's not a wedding photographer thing. Like very rarely would you have that kind of stress as a wedding photographer, I think. I mean,
the stress of a wedding photographer, I think, like I don't worry on a commercial side about is my equipment all 100% ready? I mean, I do. Like my batteries are charged, but on the wedding side, I mean, I would fret over that the night before. Like when I shot weddings, and you were
a lot less experienced back then too.
It would drive me crazy.
That probably was part of it. I mean, just in general, you're a more confident photographer. So if you ever decided to go back and do that, then I think you'd be fine. I would be fine.
Yeah, it's just like, and it was always that worry of, is something going to break? I mean, because like, let's face it, like the things that we shoot now, it's just information on a card. You know what I mean? There's that whole, you can't redo it again. That's a, I don't know if I'd want to trade that.
Well, I mean, there's things you can do to mitigate those problems.
Sure.
I mean, you can just keep looking at the back and say, okay, I got it.
Or put
don't have
dual card slots and back it up.
Don't have too big a card.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. What does this say here? Oh, yes. About the seasonal where we live. And I think it's a regional thing, but it's a very seasonal thing where we live. In commercial photography, we hope it keeps going all year round.
Right. There are seasons to it. I mean, around the holidays, things tend to slow down a little bit, but it's not like weddings where, from May till October,
November, right.
After that, you're kind of like dead in the water.
Yeah.
At least as I remember it.
Yeah. And I think it's still somewhat that way. I mean, it used to be like people got married just on Saturdays. Now they get married on Fridays. I mean,
are they?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to a wedding this month. It's on a Friday, So, I mean, things have changed somewhat, but, and you and I have really been out of the wedding thing for a long time. So like I feel like I'm speaking on things from years ago, but I think a lot of the principles are the same.
I might go back to it someday. Like
Really?
when I retire and I don't have anything else to do and I get bored, I might like approach some studio and say, hey, you guys need some help or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I liked it.
Yeah,
and
that's
I think
good.
it would be so much easier now.
Yeah. I don't think I would. I mean, I never say I wouldn't, but I don't know. I got burned out on them.
It's understandable. I mean,
Yeah.
I have such a short memory that I probably was burnt out too, and I just can't remember I was burnt out.
I remember you used to talk about loving seeing the kids slide on their knees across the dance floor like that,
Yeah. I loved weddings like that.
And there were some moments, I will admit, I mean, I don't want to make it sound all bad or anything, but like there was times where I would be so zoomed in photographing the bride and her dad dancing, and like you get caught up in the emotion of it. Like I remember a couple of times getting choked up watching them, but yeah, I mean, I think weddings and you're providing such a wonderful service for those people that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their lives.
Right.
A lot of things we do gets thrown away.
Yeah. I meant for this podcast to be a really pro commercial photography podcast, but you've taken it in the other direction, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, I know.
But, you know, if you live in a market and you can combine both, you're going to be that much busier.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe that's the way to go. And maybe you are the Terry Clark of your area that can go both ways.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. I mean, we're commercial photographers. It's what we do. And I'm glad I'm in this arena.
Yeah, I love it. Wouldn't give it up.
All right. That's our talk on how does commercial photography differ from wedding. I hope that was helpful.
You probably sold a lot of people on wedding photography.
Oh boy. All right. Well, that helps us too. All right. We are out, and see you next time.